Hello, hello! Welcome to Spatial Spotlights. This is the first in our series of live events coming to you from the team at Carto. We're going to be sharing with you how you can better, create workflows around spatial use cases, tips and tricks to get started with spatial data science. My name is Helen McKenzie, and I am kicking off our first Spatial Spotlight today. I'm just going to quickly head over to the LinkedIn group just to check that everyone can hear, everyone can see me. I think that's okay. So I'm going to get started. So let's head over to Carto, and I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, fantastic. So let's get started. So today we are going to be running an out-of-home advertising use case. In this use case, we are looking at 269 billboards all across London. If you can't tell from my accent, that is where I'm based. And we are going to decide which of these billboards are best for our CPG company. So let's imagine we are a CPG company and we want to market our fizzy drink to the good people of London. And we want to decide which billboard is best to do this. So there are two data sets we're going to look at to help us with this. First of all, hopefully you can see my screen. These are the 269 billboards. And then the data sets we're going to use to help inform our strategy are these. So first of all, we're going to be looking at the total spend on food and drink across the capital. You can see on this map here that the dark pink areas are where the spend is higher, yellow areas are lower. This comes from our esteemed data partner Experian, which you can find on our spatial data catalogue. And then secondly, we're going to be looking at footfall. So where are there more people walking around a billboard, having a chance to see that billboard and be impacted by it? So again, here you can see the dark blue areas are where there is a higher footfall around the billboards. So this is the data we're going to be looking at. This is obviously a very simplistic look because I've got 15 minutes to talk to you today, and there's much more you probably put into this kind of analysis. But let's take a look at how we can do this. So I'm going to head over to Carto Workflows. And by the way, if you don't have a Carto account, all you need to do is head over to carto.com and set up a free 2-week trial, and then you can imitate all of the steps that I'm doing today. So I'm going to set up a new workflow. Now, workflows are something that we've launched earlier in 2023, which is a visual interface for running multi-stage analysis. So you don't need to write a word of code to be able to run much more complex kinds of spatial analysis. All I've been doing there is choosing my cloud data warehouse that all of my data is saved in. So this is what workflows looks like. You can see two main elements of it here. We have sources. These are our data sets that we'll be using for this analysis, and components, which are our basically spatial tools and non-spatial tools to help us get the most out of our data and gain some insights from our data. So first of all, let's head over to our data that I just showed you. So I've got it all saved in here, hopefully. So first of all, we have our billboards. So I'll just drag and drop those onto here. And then we have our enriched grid. So if I just quickly show this map again, this grid that you're seeing here that all the data is aggregated to is something called a quad bin spatial index. So spatial indexes are a really lightweight form of spatial data where data is placed on the Earth by a short string rather than a long geometry description, which makes them really, really small to store. It makes them really, really quick to analyze, and it's perfect when you're working with really big data like this. So the first thing that we need to do to start this analysis is we need to attach the data from our quad bin data sets to our billboards. So we need to know what the spend is like at each of the billboards and what the footfall is like at each of the billboards. So to do that, we would normally have to start by establishing a geography or an area of influence for each of the billboards. So this could be whatever is most appropriate for your use case. I'm going to be doing a 10-minute walk. Normally, I would do that by using this tool that you can see here, the Create Isolines tool. But that actually takes a few minutes to run, and I'm very short on time in this bite-sized webinar. So I've actually already created these. If I can find them, here they are. So let's just drag them on. And you can see with each of these components, once it's loaded in, you can expand the detail at the bottom here, and you can take a look at the data behind those. And you can also have a look at a preview on a map. So let's just expand this. So you can see in a little bit more detail, you can see these are 10-minute walk catchments around each of our billboards. And these basically reflect the real transport infrastructure of a city. So you can see around here, this doesn't just take into account roads, but because I've asked it to look at walking as well, it's included all of the pedestrian infrastructure as well. So the first thing we need to do to be able to run this analysis, normally we would do a spatial join where we would attach the data from our quad bin grid to our isolines based on the geometry, but that's a really quite slow and expensive process. So what we're actually going to do is convert our isolines, our walking catchments, into a quad bin and join the two data sets together like that, which is a much cheaper and faster process. So first what we need to do is head to components, and we're going to use the tool quad bin polyfill. And this will convert our billboards into quad bins. So I'm just changing the resolution to 17, so it matches the resolution of the quad bins with spatial indexes. They come at something like 20 to 30 different resolutions, ranging from sort of a few meters across to a few kilometers across. So this is 17, which I think is about 200 meters in size, if I remember rightly. So you can see with every step that I run in this, this will generate a sort of intermediary result, and you can have a look at the data on the map. So here you can see these are basically our isolines, but they've been converted to a quad bin grid. And then, but when we look at our data, this is actually, I suppose the word for it is dumb data. It doesn't have anything attached to it. And what we really want to know is which of these quad bins fall in the isoline for each of our billboards. So we just need to quickly do a spatial join to get that information. So first of all, we just need to convert our quad bin polyfill back into a geometry type, which we're going to use quad bin boundary to do this. And then we're just going to run a spatial join. And this will just tell us the ID and name of the billboard that each quad bin is related to. So great, so I'm just going to run that. And while that's running, I'm going to add on a section. So workflows can get, depending on how organized you are, and I'm very disorganized, workflows can get very messy and complicated. And adding things like these sections onto workflows to help you sort of organize the different steps in the process is really, really helpful, and a good thing to start doing straight away in the process rather than at the end to help you get the most out of your data. So that's run now. So all that we need to do next is join these two things together. So let's just take a look at the results of that. So here we have our quad bin field here that has our quad bin ID, and then we also have our billboard ID. So these are the two columns that we're really interested in. And all we need to do now is add in a join, and this join will be joining based on the quad bin field. And we're taking all of the data from our enriched grid, which is our footfall and our spend data, and we're joining that to the quad bin isolines, if you will, that we just created. So let's just run that. And you can see now that we're working just in spatial indexes rather than with geometries, that stage of the process is really, really very quick, considering we're working with about 50,000 features here, which is quite a lot. Let's give that a second. Fantastic, that's run. So now we have, just when that's loaded, now we have every quad bin that falls within our isolines. We have a footfall and a spend value for that. But what we really want to know is the total or the average value for each billboard rather than the individual quad bins. So we're just going to be using this group by component to do that. And I've been using workflows for about 6 months, and I would say group by is probably the component I use the most. And it's a very kind of generic SQL component, but it's so useful. So what we're doing here is we're grouping all of this data by the billboard ID. And then we want to aggregate a couple of fields in here. So we want to aggregate the footfall. We want to know the average footfall within each isoline. And then we want to know the spend, which is this one, I believe, which is the food and drink spend. If we remember, we're looking at fizzy drinks here, so we want to know the average food and drink spend. And then we also want to keep hold of the geometry of the isoline, and we're just going to use any value for that. So let's just run that quickly. So with workflow, something you'll notice is I've been running every step, as I go. And the only reason I'm doing this is because I'm sort of doing an educational presentation. You can actually just string a whole workflow together without running every single individual component and just run it all at the end. It's sort of up to you how you most like working. I quite love working like this so I can see how everything's working as I go, but it's completely up to you. So now we have a group by output. So let's take a look at the data. Fantastic. So we now have the geometry of the isoline, the billboard ID, and the average footfall and the average spend within each of our isolines. So now what we want to do is come up with basically a score that scores all of our billboards based on these two characteristics. So the first thing we need to do is normalize each of these. So turn them into a value from 0 to 1, 1 being the optimum, so the highest footfall and the highest spend, and 0 being the reverse. And then we're just going to add those together to give us a score out of 2. So 2 would be where our footfall and our spend is the highest, and 0 would be where it's the lowest in an ideal world. So let's just add on normalize. So we want to normalize our footfall, and then we want to normalize our WVCE. Please, no one ask in the comments what that stands for. And let's just run that, and I'll get adding this as a section again. And something else worth noting as well with workflows is you're only ever running what you haven't run already. So every time I'm hitting run here, I'm not reprocessing this entire workflow. I'm only reprocessing that which I've just changed or which I've edited, so it doesn't have to rerun every time. So great, we now have those two normalized indexes added together, those created. So we just now need to create a column to add the two together. And this is where I'm going to really embarrass myself by being an absolutely terrible speller. So I just need to take the outputs of these two columns. So we want footfall joined average norm. Okay, that's 1 out of 2 I've spelled correctly. And then this one is WVCE 01 I've joined. I'll have to go back and check that one. It's always when you're typing in front of people that you make spelling mistakes. I think that's actually correct. Great. So we just need to add those two together, and this will give us that all-important score out of 2 for how optimal our billboards are for our fizzy drink. Which shouldn't take too long, hopefully. Although the normalizing is quite a complex process, so that will take a little longer. Oh, and of course I've spelled something wrong, but luckily it's given me the error message for what I've done wrong. Yes, I did mean that one. Thank you, workflows. So helpful to people like me who can't spell. Okay, so what we're going to do after this, just while that's running, is we are going to look at the top 10 billboards, because this is giving us a score for every single one of those 269 billboards in London. So yes, I spelled it correctly, fantastic. Only 2 times trying. I've done this demonstration before and it's been a lot more than 2. So now what we're going to do, let's just take a look at the output of that actually. So now you can see here we have our geometry for isoline, we have our billboard ID, we have all of the raw data. We also now have our normalized values for each of those 2 inputs and our index out of 2 for how optimal each billboard is for our fizzy drink. So let's just take a look at the results of that. Let's interrogate that a bit more. So let's add in an order by, and this will basically rank our results. So we want to say, let's order the data by index, and we want it descending. So we want the optimal one first, and then let's limit that to 10 and take a look at our 10 top billboards across London. Great. Oh, I've only got 1 minute left. I hope you can all stay for a couple of minutes while I finish this. But if not, this is a good opportunity to plug. If not, we'll be uploading all of these to our YouTube channel, which is Carto HQ, and you'll be able to find all of our spatial spotlights on there the week after they have been created. Okay, fantastic. So that's created. And let's take a look at what we've got. In fact, the map will be a bit more interesting here. Loading map. Great, here we go. So Let's take a look at these results. I don't know if many people on the call know London very well, but I always like being able to ground truth the results of my analysis. And I think as someone who lives in London, this really rings true for me. So if you remember back from right at the start, these 10 locations that we're seeing here are the top locations for footfall and for spend on food and drink. And this really rings true for me. So we've got all of our locations are in central London, as you'd expect. We've got a few around these really touristy, busy areas like Covent Garden, up Tottenham Court Road. We've got a really busy area here around London Bridge. And then slightly further out of London is this area around Earl's Court and Kensington. If you know London very well, you'll know this is quite a touristy area. It's also quite a swanky, posh area. So I think this all really rings true for me. So what you could do if you are a CPG company looking where to advertise your fizzy drink, you could take this information and go and approach a company that owns out-of-home assets and say, I'm really, really interested in that billboard. I'd like to advertise there. How do we go about this? But maybe you're the reverse. Maybe you are an out-of-home company who owns these billboards and you're trying to target specific businesses to help drive growth basically in your company. You can use this information for that as well. So I'm just going to add in the last 2 minutes one final bit of intelligence to this. So I'm just adding in stores from our data partner SafeGraph. This will take a little while to load because I think there's about 90,000 stores in this data set. But what we're going to do with this is identify which stores fall within each of those top 10 catchments. And then we can use that to basically say, I'll go and target those stores to try and sell my product to them. So that here we can see we've got 88,000 SafeGraph stores across all of London. What we want to do is filter that down to only relevant stores. So let's take a look at the store types that we have. So we're just using the select distinct component. If you're a SQL user, you'll probably notice that a lot of the language we use in here is based on SQL language to make it easier for you to sort of get started. But hopefully a lot of it is intuitive to you as well, even if you're not a SQL user. So what we're doing there is just working out what are the different store types available to us in London. As I said, there's about 90,000 features in here, so it might take a little bit longer. Great, so that's finished. And you can see quite intuitively, when something's worked, it turns green. And then when it's sort of finished initializing, you'll be able to see the number of features that have been created in that process, which is really helpful to sort of help you validate your process as you go. And where they haven't worked, they turn red. So the store type we are interested in is grocery stores. So we're going to add in a simple filter to our stores and say, I'm only interested in grocery stores in London. So let's run that. And then the final thing we will do is pick out which of those grocery stores fall within those catchments, just once that's finished running. Great. So now we have all of those stores, so we can just add those into our spatial filter. And we're going to use the condition as the isolines that we've created. So let's just run that. That might not work because it hadn't finished initializing, but let's see. Job, that should run. And then the final thing you would do once you've run all of this analysis is you have a few options. So one is save this as a table. So when you're running this analysis, every step will save as a temporary table anyway that you can access in your cloud data warehouse. But once you're sort of happy with your analysis, you want to save it, you maybe want to make a visualization with it, you can use save as table, or you have another option, which is send by email. So with this option, you might say, now you've got all of the stores identified across London, which are fall within the catchments of those really high potential billboards. You could then maybe send that, attach that to this send by email component. Oh, let's just take a look at the results. I'm getting ahead of myself. So here we have all of the grocery stores, which fall within the 10-minute catchment of those really high performing stores. So then you might want to then say, great, let's target these for some of our marketing, maybe for our sales team. So you could attach that information to the send by email component and send that directly to your sales team without having to download the information and send it off yourself, that can go. So that's sort of the output of what this work would be. You might want to take this into Carto Builder and create a map like I showed you right at the start. What's really good about this process as well is it's really, really iterative. So you can really modify this to lots of different use cases. So first of all, maybe your billboard inputs, that might change periodically. The sort of assets might change. You might get new ones added, ones taken away. So you can change that really easily. You can change the input information. So here we just looked at two quite narrow use cases. We just looked at footfall and food and drink spend, but you could also look at things like hotel spend or spend on tobacco or spend on alcohol or anything like that. You could change that in here as well. You could change the type of store you're looking at in here to not look at grocery stores. You could be looking at convenience stores if you really wanted to target those sort of smaller grocery stores. So that's sort of a really whistle-stop tour of an example workflow that you can put together to help with your out-of-home workflows. I'll just stop sharing my screen now. I'm very much over time, so I don't think I have time for any questions, but if I see any questions in the comments of this, I will get back to you on LinkedIn, or feel free to drop me a DM on LinkedIn and I'll answer via there. I hope you really enjoyed the first of our Spatial Spotlights. Next week is a colleague of mine, Matt Forrest. He'll be talking all about telcos and use cases around telecom companies. And just finally, if you have any suggestions for future events, things you'd like us to cover, whether it's a spotlight on a data set, a spotlight on a tool, things like this that are more of a sort of work through of a specific use case, I organize these. So feel free to drop me a DM and we can have a chat and see if we can work something out. So yeah, thank you so much for coming along listening. I hope you enjoyed it and hope to see you at one of these soon. Thank you. Bye.